In October 1983, Peoria, Illinois was a typical, thriving industrial hub in the American Midwest. The center of the city's social life was the Northwoods Mall, a bustling complex serving as the primary destination for local families and weekend shoppers. But that weekend, dozens of healthy residents began reporting to local hospitals with terrifying symptoms. It usually started with a severe headache, followed almost immediately by blurred vision. Emergency services were quickly overwhelmed as more victims appeared, all suffering from the same inexplicable afflictions. Across the city, unconnected people were suddenly falling into total paralysis. Local doctors were watching a mass medical emergency unfold, and they had no idea what was attacking their patients. The illness presented as descending neuroparalysis. Patients systematically lost the ability to swallow, then to speak, and eventually to walk. Keeping the victims alive required extreme medical intervention. Within days, nearly half of the patients were placed on mechanical ventilators just to stay alive. Initial blood tests offered no answers. The symptoms defied standard food poisoning, lacking the markers of E. coli or a salmonella infection. As more patients reached the point of respiratory failure, the stakes moved past simple diagnosis. With time running out, local officials placed an urgent call to the CDC. The CDC investigators arrived with a single objective: map the daily movements of every hospitalized patient to find where their lives intersected. By cross-referencing patient histories with a control group of healthy residents, they looked for a shared point of exposure that only the sick had visited. They found a common denominator. Every single paralyzed patient had recently eaten at the Skewer Inn, a popular restaurant located inside the Northwoods Mall. The announcement triggered a wave of public concern. Because the Skewer Inn was a trusted community staple, the news that it was the source of the outbreak sent hundreds of panicked diners to local clinics. Ground Zero had been located. The focus of the investigation now shifted from the location itself to the specific poison hidden on the restaurant's menu. Investigators meticulously analyzed the order tickets from the weekend of the outbreak, looking for the specific contaminated dish. They quickly identified a high correlation between the victims and one particular menu item, the Skewer Inn's patty melt sandwich. A standard patty melt contains beef, cheese, and bread. Because these are perishable items, the CDC initially focused on finding a batch of spoiled meat or contaminated dairy. However, they found that not everyone who ate the sandwich became ill. To explain why, investigators looked closer at the specific modifications and toppings on each order ticket. The data revealed a startling pattern. The patrons who remained healthy had asked for their sandwiches plain. Every paralyzed patient, without exception, had eaten the sautéed onions. This is Clostridium botulinum, the bacteria responsible for producing the most toxic substance known to science. The discovery was unexpected. At the time, botulism was almost exclusively associated with improperly processed home canned goods, not fresh vegetables in a commercial kitchen. Laboratory tests on 75 raw onions taken from the Skewer Inn's pantry confirmed the theory. Dormant botulinum spores were found naturally occurring on the onion skins. Direct evidence eventually came from a patient's home. Investigators recovered a discarded foil wrapper from a leftover patty melt, and laboratory washings from that foil confirmed the presence of type A botulinum toxin. A fresh vegetable garnish had been weaponized in a professional kitchen. The remaining question for the CDC was exactly how a routine cooking process had triggered the toxin. Clostridium botulinum requires a specific set of conditions to produce toxin. It needs warmth, low acidity, and a total absence of oxygen. The restaurant's prep routine unknowingly provided all three. The onions were cooked and then left in a pan on a warm stove, submerged beneath a thick layer of melted margarine. That layer of liquid fat acted as a sealant. It created a barrier that prevented any oxygen from reaching the warm onions below, creating an anaerobic environment. Inside this oxygen-free zone, the dormant spores germinated. They began to multiply rapidly, releasing the deadly neurotoxin directly into the onions. The Peoria outbreak was the result of a tragic irony. A standard restaurant holding practice had accidentally served as a perfect incubator for a biological hazard. The CDC rushed an experimental, slow-drip antitoxin to Peoria. It was administered to the victims to halt the advance of the paralysis, though it could not reverse the damage already done. Recovery was a grueling process. patients spent months relearning basic motor functions, and though most survived, one victim ultimately died from complications related to the toxin. The incident changed the medical understanding of food safety. It proved that even freshly cooked foods could harbor botulism if they were improperly held at room temperature. This led to a national overhaul of food regulations. Authorities established strict temperature danger zones, dictating how hot cooked vegetables must be kept to prevent bacterial growth. The terror of the Northwoods Mall outbreak forced a transformation in public health. It ensured that an everyday restaurant meal would never again be allowed to hide this silent, invisible killer.